I hope you have a sweet tooth like I do, because we're going to be drawing a cupcake today. Hi, Shanna Rowe Jackson here from Caution Artist at Play. I recently teamed up with Opus Art Supplies and Holbein to do a Zoom demo where I used the Holbein colored pencils with the Holbein Meltz to create a fun and realistic cupcake. And it was a blast. Sadly, Opus does not do replays on their website for that, but they were generous enough to send me the Zoom footage that they recorded for me and told me I could do whatever I wanted with it. Well, unfortunately, Zoom doesn't take the best recordings, and so it really wasn't up to the Shanna standard for the channel. However, I remembered that I had recorded the original drawing from when I was trying it out to see if it would even be good for a demo. And so I'm going to use that footage today and show you a real-time demo of rendering a realistic cupcake with Holbein colored pencils and Holbein Meltz. I will also be attempting to remember some of the questions that were asked during the original demo so I could answer them again in this video. I do want to give you a disclaimer. When I originally recorded this footage, I did it so that I could see how long it was going to take me to do this project, to get an idea, to see if it would even be a good real-time project, because I only had an hour and a half for the demo. So I was not concentrating on my camera angles. It is a 5x7. There are going to be times where my hand blocks it a little bit because I was doing a top-down view. I don't typically do a lot of real-time videos on this channel, and that was not my intention when I first filmed this. But in the future, when I do decide to do more real-time tutorials, I will work on those camera angles so you can see past my southpaw. But it's still clearer than the demo footage. So we're just gonna roll with it. I apologize for that. But I am doing it in real time, and so if you want to follow along, I do have the reference photo and the line drawing along with a copy of the original drawing kind of as a reference for you on my website for you to download. I will put the link in the description below. I recommend, if you want to follow along, get that line drawing transferred onto your sheet ahead of time, get your sketch down or whatever, because I'm not showing you how to draw the cupcake. I'm just showing you how I basically fill it in this video. And of course, I will also link all of the materials that we're using in the description below as well. So let's just get down to it. The colors we will be using today are Burnt Sienna, Jaune Brilliant, White, Black, Violet, Marigold, Canary Yellow, Burnt Umber, Yellow Ochre, Cool Gray number 3. And all these colors can be found in the 24 set of Artist Colored Pencils by Holbein. We will also be using a Perfection Eraser by Faber-Castell. It can be sharpened like a pencil. Some of the Holbein Meltz. This is one of the stars of the show today. And a Factus Extra Soft Eraser, along with just a regular 2-hole pencil sharpener. And then we will be using the Caran d'Ache palette Aquarelle. It has a rough side for coloring on, so we can use watercolor-like techniques with our Meltz colored pencil blender. And for the paper, I am using Stonehenge white drawing paper. Okay, so we are going to jump right in with the fun part, and that is creating a watercolor-like wash using our colored pencils and our Meltz colored pencil blender. I am taking my Canary Yellow and my Jaune Brilliant and scribbling it on the palette. And then I'm going to come through and I'm going to put a few drops of the Holbein Meltz colored pencil blender in a little cup. And I'm going to bring some of it over with my brush and mix it all together on the palette. And as you can see, that creates a watercolor-like substance that you can paint on to your piece. I'm going to do this for all the areas of the frosting. And I'm just being careful to paint around the sprinkles. We will work on those later. Now, I'm starting with this part because I want to be able to have time to allow this to dry so that we can come in later with subsequent layers of pencil without damaging the paper. And it is going to be a little bit transparent. Colored pencil is transparent to begin with, and washing it out this way makes it even more so we can see our lines underneath. Now, typically I wouldn't have this dark of an outline when working, but I wanted you to be able to see my outline still so that you can follow along more easily if you choose to. Something that I want to mention is this technique works best with Meltz because Meltz is an aqueous solution. So they are actually water-based. Now, I don't know how Holbein does it. They have a proprietary recipe, so we don't know all the ingredients, but Meltz is supposed to be non-toxic. The Meltz solution does have a slight smell, especially up close. It almost smells like some sort of cleaning solution to me, but to me it's very faint. I don't notice it while working, and I'm normally sensitive to different kinds of scents like that. I'll get headaches and things like that, but I've never had any issues with headaches from this or with the odor bothering me while I work. And unlike odorless mineral spirits or other petroleum-based solvents, these don't give off hidden harmful vapors. And because Meltz is water-based, it doesn't leave oily staining on your paper like other solutions do. And not only does it not stain the paper the way odorless mineral spirits would or Zest It would, you can also blend water-soluble products like your watercolor pencils with Meltz and combine it with your colored pencils, which is not something that you can do with other solutions. Now that we have our layers laid in on the frosting, I am going to come in and work on the cupcake. I'm starting off with an underlayer of violet because violet contrasts nicely with yellow since they are opposite each other on the color wheel. And this is just going to bring a little bit more life to our chocolate cake. It's going to show through just a little bit under our burnt umber and adds a little bit more color and whimsy to our cupcake. So I'm just coming in and I am using very small circular motions to create the texture. Now, this can be a really great way to fill the tooth of your paper, but I am not trying to fill the tooth of my paper at this time because I want that classic staticky kind of grainy look that colored pencil lends. I'm going to use that to my advantage because it is also the same kind of texture as cake. Not all your colored pencil pieces or all parts of your colored pencil pieces need to be blended out smoothly. Use the texture of your pencil to your advantage and get the most of the medium that you're working with. For the ridges of the cupcake, I am going to be using gradients. So in the darkest areas, I'm using more pressure. And as I get further away and closer to the light areas, I am lightening my pressure. I want to keep in mind that there is going to be some light reflecting off the wrapper of the cupcake. And so I am leaving areas for the lightest lights when I'm doing this. And I'm paying close attention to the reference photo at this point, mainly to figure out where the light is coming from. The light seems to be hitting the cupcake wrapper from the outsides on both sides of the cupcake. So on the left-hand side of the page where I'm working now, the light seems to be hitting most from the left-hand side. As I work my way around the cupcake, there's going to be some light on either side of these ridges in the cupcake, and a little bit of a darker area in the middle where the cupcake shows through. And then as I get towards the right side of the page, it's going to shift to the opposite where the light comes from the right side, basically illuminating the cupcake. This is going to be a semi-transparent paper wrapper, and so we will be coming in with our white later on to burnish things out. So now, as you can see, I'm coming into those darker areas of the ridges on the opposite side now, using more pressure where it's darker and lighter pressure where it's lighter. So the basics of a gradient. One of the questions that I got when I did the original demo with Opus is how often do I sharpen my pencils? Now, I am in the habit of actually rotating my pencil as I work because as you wear down one side of your pencil core, the other side is actually getting sharper. So you're not going to see me stop very often to sharpen my pencils. Holbein pencils also keep a sharp point for a pretty long time. They're on the harder side, but blend out beautifully and easily. So they don't wear down too fast. But you're going to see me occasionally rotate my pencil. It's going to be very subtle, but that's just so that as I'm wearing down one side of the core, I can use the other side that has kind of sharpened itself. So I'm constantly finding the point of my pencil so that I can get into the finer areas that I need to for detail. Now, as we start working towards the middle, we're going to see where the light hits both edges of the ridges. So I'm going to put in my darkest values in the innermost wrinkles, and then I'm going to leave just a little bit of light on either side of those ridges and come in with medium pressure down the middle of the ridge to add a little bit of a shadow line where that chocolate cake is showing through the cupcake wrapper. And I'm just keeping, again, my pressures in mind. We want lighter pressure in the areas where we don't want the purple to be as dark, and harder pressure in the areas where we want the purple to be really nice and rich and dark. And then, of course, just medium pressure in the areas where we want something in between. Just keeping our values in mind here. And you can do a lot with just one pencil, just by varying the pressure that you put on the pencil. And Holbein pencils don't really take a lot of pressure to build up vibrancy and saturation, so a little really goes a long way with these pencils. And I think it's important to note here that even in the darker areas, I am not burnishing with my pencil because I want to still leave some of the tooth of the paper so I can layer over it with my browns later on. So even though it is pretty dark in those areas, I am still not using as much pressure as it would take to burnish. Another question that I got in the Opus demo was whether or not I work dark to light or light to dark, or what order I work in when I'm working in colored pencils. Now, it's kind of a multifaceted answer. Generally speaking, I do lighter layers first and then come up on top with subsequent layers, making things darker. So in the traditional, almost watercolor-like sense, I'm doing my lighter layers and then I darken my layers as I go. So in that way, I do work light to dark. But I will place in my dark values when I need to. And oftentimes that will be towards the beginning of a section so that I can gauge the rest of my values. But again, I am not hammering on my pencils. I am still keeping my layers lighter so that I can come on top with subsequent layers and darken as I go. So as you can see, I am now coming in with my burnt umber to get that nice, rich, chocolatey look. And I am letting some of that purple show through. I am basically repeating the same exact steps that I took with the violet previously and just going over it with my brown. Again, using the circular pencil strokes, but not being too careful about trying to blend it out because I want the texture of the pencil to lend itself to the texture of cake. So we're letting layers of violet show through, and you can still see a little bit of white as well, which is not necessarily to be seen as the paper showing through. It could actually be seen as the effect of light hitting moist cake. So again, don't be too quick to try to cover up that paper texture when you are working on some sort of subject that has texture to it, because the paper texture could absolutely aid in the illusion of the texture that you are trying to achieve. And in order to achieve this kind of grainy look, you don't need overly sharp pencils. So this is an area where you don't have to worry if your pencil is a little bit dull. There are absolutely times where you need to have a sharp point on your pencil. Colored Pencil 101, when you are trying to get into the tooth of the paper and you want smooth blends, you want a sharp point so that you can get into the tooth of the paper and then continue to layer up until you get that smooth look. Because if you start off with a dull point in an area that you want smooth, it's going to be that much harder to get into the tooth of the paper and to correct it later on. So say if we hadn't used the melts to speed up our time to create the frosting and we wanted the smooth look of the frosting with pencils alone, we would come in with a really sharp point and use very tight, small circular motions to get into the tooth of that paper and keep layering to keep it smooth. For the lower part of the cupcake, we are doing the circular motions, but we're not as concerned about getting into the tooth of that paper. So having a blunt tip for this part actually works to our advantage. And right now I am using that tip to kind of scrumble over all the layers I put below to create more of that texture and put more of the brown as kind of a glaze over the areas I already put down. So having a sharp point on your pencil at all times isn't necessary. Look at the texture of the thing that you're trying to create before you sharpen your pencil, because every time you sharpen your pencil, you are throwing some of that core away, and you want the core to go onto your paper and into your artwork and not just go out into the trash can when unnecessary, which again harkens back to what I was talking about earlier with rotating the pencil. So now I'm coming in with my cool gray number 3, and I'm using the same principles I did when I laid in the purple and the burnt umber, and that is just paying attention to where my lights and darks are, and I'm just bringing in a little bit of shadow area on the white areas of the cupcake wrapper where it is pulling away from the cupcake. And it is semi-transparent, as I mentioned before, so you're going to see a little bit of shadowing where the cupcake shows through, but not as strong as on the bottom where the wrapper is kind of stuck to the cupcake where it was baked in there. And then I'm just going to do a quick little glaze very loosely over the rest of it to dull down that white a little bit. I'm not afraid to go too dark in these areas right now because I know I'm going to come in with my white and burnish over it later to get that glazed look of the cupcake wrapper. And now we're coming in with the Holbein Meltz again to blend it out. One of the other questions I got during my original demo was, is the Meltz only for watercolor effects, or can they be used to blend colored pencil the way you would odorless mineral spirits? And my answer to that is the specific purpose was originally to blend out colored pencils, which is what you see me doing here. I got playing around one day because I wanted to speed up my colored pencil process, and through trial and error, I discovered that I can scribble my pencil on a palette and use my Holbein Meltz with it to create a watercolor-like solution. So now that's how I like to work. I was just touching the cupcake frosting to see if that's dry, and once the coolness went away, I knew that I could come in with my colored pencils for shading. So that's what I'm doing now. I am using my marigold to create some shadow areas. I will also be bringing in some more of the canary yellow and some of the yellow ochre for darker areas. So back to what I was saying about the Holbein Meltz. They were originally created so that you could lay down colored pencil on your paper and blend it out traditionally. However, I'm a mixed media girl. As you know, if you follow me on my channel, you know that I like to play around with my materials and figure out new ways to work with them. And so I like to use them like a watercolor to speed up my process. But of course, I will come in and blend with them traditionally as well, which you just saw on the cupcake below. Right now, I'm just working lightly with my marigold to add a little bit more shading to that yellow. I'm taking care not to jump too dark too fast because this yellow frosting is a nice light springy yellow color. So I don't want to lose that kind of fresh springiness that I have from the layer that I already put down. So I'm just coming in and using the same principles I did before. I also am bringing in the Jaune Brilliant to bring down some of that really saturated yellow. And I'm going back and forth using the same gradient kind of principles I used in the paper wrapper below. And I'm going with heavier strokes in the areas that I want to have darker, and lightening my strokes in areas that I want to be lighter. Now, I am leaving lighter spots towards the tops of the ridges of the frosting, and I am having darker shadows towards the bottom because the light is kind of hitting this cupcake from all sides, like I mentioned earlier. So it's really surrounded by light. There's some light coming from the top and there's some light coming from the sides. Almost like a backlit situation, but not in a way that completely silhouettes the cupcake. So I want to make sure that I have room for the highlights on that frosting. And I'm following my reference, but I'm not going to get too picky about it. I realize that not every single wrinkle is going to be exact to the reference, and that is perfectly fine. Working in realism or representational art in general is basically just creating the illusion of an object that already exists. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you don't see your drawing side by side with your photo, people aren't going to know that the wrinkle isn't exactly where it was in the photo. Now that I've laid in more shadows in my frosting, I'm coming in with my burnt sienna and my cool gray 3 to create some shadow areas on our sprinkles. Now, because this is only a 7x5, we're not going to get a ton of detail here. So I'm mainly coming in with kind of a line, like a shadow line, because I know I'm not going to get all 5 stages of my light and shadow on these tiny little objects. Again, I'm just creating the illusion of it. So I'm going to come in with a shadow line, and on one side, I'm going to have a light layer of my color, and on the other side, I'm going to leave it nearly white so that I can come in with a highlight. So it's basically breaking it down into 3 values, but it's still going to give the illusion of a 3-dimensional object. If this was a larger piece, then I would obviously try to work in more detail. And I'm going to put in my shadows first, and then I'm going to come in and burnish over those with the lighter color. So in this example, I might use some burnt sienna in the shadow area and then come in with either yellow ochre or marigold to kind of blend out those shadow areas in the more dark yellow sprinkles. And then when I want really darker shadows and like to create a little bit of a drop shadow on the frosting, I'm going to come in with my burnt umber to create that, but very, very lightly. I don't want to get too crazy about it. Again, just to differentiate between the different sprinkles. And for the white ones, the white sprinkles were quite simple. I just brought in my cool gray number 3, did the same kind of thing with a shadow, and then I'll come in later and burnish over with white. And in areas that I went over a place where I wanted highlight, I might come in with my Faber-Castell Perfection Eraser. And if there's any areas that I went way too dark, or if there was an area that I want to lighten up my line drawing so that it's not showing through my layers, I come in with my Factus Soft Eraser. So that's why we have those 2 erasers. We have the Perfection Eraser for detail and to try to create some more highlights, and we have the soft eraser basically for larger areas that we need lifting on. And I meant to mention earlier, I am working on Stonehenge drawing paper. This is the Stonehenge White, not to be confused with their Stonehenge Aqua. The Stonehenge Aqua is a watercolor paper and it's beautiful, but pencils tend to dig into it a little bit. It's a little bit more of a delicate surface. Their drawing surface is fantastic for pencils, and it's strong enough to hold up to using the Meltz and water on it. And so that's why I am using that. All the materials will be linked in the description below, as I mentioned in the intro. Now I'm coming in with my white, and I am creating the white caps on our little mountain of frosting. Essentially just coming in with my highlights, burnishing areas of the sprinkles, and bringing in some highlights on the darker sprinkles. And you'll see me go back and forth between the colors of the sprinkles and my white during this part, trying to pick out details, get them to stand out a little bit better. And now I will come through with my yellow ochre and darken some areas as well. And then down the line, I might even come in, if I have some really deep ridges, you'll see me bring in that burnt sienna, which is the color that I used for my outline. Using the Meltz in the frosting area really sped things up a lot. And it was fantastic. It worked out great to do that area first and then come in and do my cupcake while that dried and then come in with details. And now I have that underpainting. I'm not fighting with the tooth of the paper or the white of the paper. And it already looked a little bit smooth to begin with. So it really helps speed things along. And again, the reason why I didn't do that in all parts of this is because I wanted some of that tooth of the paper to show through. So I didn't want to cover the cupcake area with just an underpainting of brown using my Meltz because I wanted that tooth to show. So this is the fun part where we're going to be going back and forth, picking out certain details. I'm coming in with my black and darkening up areas of the cake, going around those little sprinkles, and tightening up the lines to my cupcake wrapper. Now there's just a slight drop shadow under that frosting, so I'm going to be coming through with my darkest areas there. And there's a little highlight here on the cupcake where I brought in a little bit of my gray and burnished it out and a little bit of my white. It's a little cool compared to the rest of the surrounding cake, and the white and the gray obviously were on the cooler side. Again, coming in and working on that shadow area underneath the frosting, using the same pencil strokes we've been using before, small circular motions. I do have a sharp point here because I want to really clean up that edge of the frosting and get into the fine details of that cupcake wrapper. So I want to have a sharp point for that. I'm not pushing too hard here, but they do have a really nice dark black, and it really helps to just clean things up. And I'm paying attention to my cupcake and the areas of light and shadow. I don't want to cover all that brown and purple. I want to still have that rich chocolatiness, but the black lends itself perfectly to deepening the areas and making it feel a little bit more rich, especially in contrast to that little highlight and the areas that we left sparkling through. Now we're going to come in with the white and continue to clean up those edges of the cupcake wrapper. And I am going to start burnishing those areas in the cupcake wrapper. As I mentioned before, it's a semi-transparent paper. So there's going to be parts of the cupcake showing through, but the cupcake wrapper is white. So I'm going to bring in my white, and I'm going to move in the opposite direction of what I moved before, still doing gradients. So in the areas that I want to have my lightest highlight, I'm going to put the most pressure. But in the areas that I have some shadow areas, I'm going to put less pressure of my white. So it's still going to burnish over it and mix in with the layers below without completely obliterating those shadow areas, so that it looks like there's a paper glaze over the rest of the cupcake below. So even in my darkest areas, I'm going to come in with the white, but I am going to use a little less pressure. Which is one reason why it was okay that I went a little bit dark in some of those areas, because I knew that I was going to be using my white almost as a glaze to create that papery look of the wrapper. And I'm not being too neat about this. I'm scribbling through. I don't need an overly sharp point for this part either, because I want those layers below to show through. So if there's some areas that aren't completely covered with the white, that's fine, because we don't want to do away with those shadow areas completely. But it's still giving the same effect. And I'm doing this over the entire wrapper, including the top part, where there's just some gray shadowing at this point. In areas where I want to dull it down a little bit more, I'm actually coming in and burnishing with my gray a little bit. This is the cleanup portion of the artwork. I'm coming in, I'm beefing up shadows where I need to, I'm straightening up lines, I'm blending things out with Meltz again to get that smoothness back in the frosting. Another question that came up in the demo was whether or not Meltz works with other brands of pencils, and it absolutely does. First of all, the Holbein colored pencils work well with all the other brands that I have used before, but the Holbein Meltz will work with a lot of the other brands I work with. They work great with Prismacolor, they work great with Polychromos, they work great with all the Derwent lines that I work with, including Lightfast and drawing lines. The only pencils that I had a hard time getting them to work with was the Caran d'Ache Luminance. I did retry them with the Pablos lately, and they do work with the Pablos as well, but they do not touch the Luminance. They also don't tend to blend out things like oil pastels or wax pastels unless they're water soluble. So they will blend out the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s because those are water soluble, but they will not blend out the Neocolor 1s because they are not water soluble, and they don't tend to blend out oil pastel as well. But they are pretty fun because you can combine your colored pencils with your water soluble pencils. If you, for instance, you only have like say a 12 set of the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer watercolor pencils, but you have a bunch of the Polychromos and you want to supplement with your colored pencils, you can actually blend them out together because these will blend out water-soluble media. Now, for the shadow area, I am using the palette method. I am just scribbling colors that I've already used. Where we didn't put a background in here, we don't really have context for the shadow. So we're just going to use some of the colors that we used in the Cupcake, some of the browns, the violet, a little bit of the black and the gray, and mix it all together on the palette and lift it with our Meltz and put it down. This is one area where it's really important that you have Meltz, because if you were to use something in this area, such as odorless mineral spirits, where we're not using a lot of pigment, the paper would stain and soak through, and the shadow may not show up correctly. But this is a perfect example of why the Meltz is such a fantastic tool, because that will dry to the shadow color that you were hoping for instead of having an oily stain on the paper. And I don't want to put a shadow in with colors that aren't in the piece. I find doing a shadow out of all the colors that are already in there creates unity in the piece as well. And something really fun and exciting we discovered in the demo is that these will actually blend out graphite. Like it's a water-soluble graphite, but not just the water-soluble kind. So regular graphite can be blended out like it's water-soluble using Meltz. I was blown away. Somebody had asked about it, and we tried it on camera, and it worked. Now I'm just coming in, darkening up certain areas, again, straightening up my lines, and putting in the finishing touches. I had so much fun with this. The demo was fantastic, and I'm really excited that I am now able to share this original footage with you. Please let me know if you tried this, and tag me on Instagram and post your pictures. Caution Artist at Play on Instagram. All right, folks, I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. I am planning on doing some courses down the line, and so this will give me kind of an idea and some practice for doing courses. So let me know in the comments below what kind of courses you would like to see from me. If you would like to see courses from me, I'm thinking about a colored pencil for beginner course, maybe an Inktense for beginner. Just drop your ideas below. As you know, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'm inching my way towards it, and I will keep you all updated. Please let me know if you tried this and if you followed along, and tag me on Instagram. I have all my handles for my social media in the description below. I will see you next time. Have a fantastic day. Bye.